Hello out there, Michael Tinkser here. Coming Back Stronger is a special edition podcast series focusing on the way food and drinks businesses are bouncing back as the world slowly starts to reopen from COVID-19. We will especially be sharing great stories on how progressive leaders are bouncing back from the pandemic by utilizing the power of technology and delivery. By listening into these conversations in the coming period, you'll be able to pick up some great stories, insights and facts, as well as best practice from industry experts, independent operators to national chains who all are setting a new standard for how to operate in the new normal. Vita Mojo and Hospitality Maverick joins forces on this project due to we have a shared belief on how tech plays a massive role in building companies that's good for people, communities and the planet. In this episode, I talk with Yazz Abdulla, the CEO and founder of Urban Hospitality, a consultancy business that's been focusing on delivering dark kitchen projects over the last couple of years. Yazz and I talk about the rise of dark kitchen and delivery, as well as the impact on the restaurant industry pre and post pandemic. We also talk about in detail how you set up and build an outstanding dark kitchen brand and operation, and how the market will move the next 12 to 18 months. Yazz also gives some stellar advice to operators at the end of the interview, so tune in and enjoy. Welcome to the Coming Back Stronger podcast. We're almost in the middle of June and there's a lot of conversation going on about when are we going to open? There's been a couple of days thrown recently here in the UK, the 22nd of June or the 4th of July. And we have been on a tremendous journey and there's a long journey ahead of us as well. And for this episode, we have invited a good friend of mine, colleague, and also an extremely expert in dark kitchen and delivery, and actually been on that journey both here in the UK, but also in Dubai. So welcome to the podcast, Yazz Abdulla.
Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm very well. And yourself?
I'm okay, not too bad at all. Just weathering the madness and the storm that we're currently experiencing here in the UK and I guess internationally. So yes, all well. Thank you for asking.
And I'm very excited that we're going to have this conversation today because we have talked about, delivery, dark kitchen, the industry for years now when we meet up for a coffee or we're doing projects together. And it's interesting, some of the things has actually come to fruition as things we didn't actually wish for the industry came in such a fast pace, it almost couldn't cope with it. But we'll come back to that in a second. But before we jump into that, if people should have an idea about who you are and what you've been up to and why you actually ended up working with dark kitchens and delivery businesses, could you just give you a quick elevator pitch about who you are, what you've been up to, and a bit of your experience as well would probably be appropriate.
Sure, absolutely, Michael. So I'm Yazz Abdulla. I'm the founder of Urban Hospitality Group. We specialize in bespoke projects for our clients, predominantly working in the UK, Europe, and the Middle East. We've done projects pretty much covering everything from casual dining restaurants to grab and go, delivery, and also up to working with Michelin star chefs. I've been in the industry 25 years, and as with most of us, we land with our feet down and we just start from the bottom and work our way up. So, yeah, it's something which gets me out of bed, and I wouldn't do anything else. Kitchens has been something which, or certainly dark kitchens, what we're talking about today, has been involved in for the past, I would say, about a good 2 years. And I could actually see the trend evolving, leaning towards dark kitchens or virtual kitchens, as they're commonly known. The aggregators, of course, your standard operators, the big boys, the big three, as I like to call them, Just Eat, Uber Eats, and Deliveroo. They are they have been very pivotal in its acceleration over the years. I've been working with your main high street operators in the UK and across Europe on helping them enter the world of dark kitchens. And certainly over the past sort of 12 months, I've been quite involved in virtual kitchens, which essentially is brands that have been created specifically for operations in dark kitchens and then get expedited to your local customers. And one of those operators, quite a big operator in Germany and Austria. And there was a food tech company and pretty much involved with those guys. And certainly in the first quarter of this year, we've been approached by a couple of operators currently working on projects to do with dark kitchens and delivery. And of course, the pandemic has naturally shifted that attention to dark kitchens as expected, with a lot of the population staying at home and resorting to delivered food.
The pandemic, as you mentioned, have changed a lot of things. And if we just should set the scene and how you see this has, impacted the industry and especially the work around what you do, and where you're seeing it, maybe it's going in the coming period, because there's a lot of I would call it horrible news at the moment. Every day you open your inbox, you almost think there's people here that are losing jobs within the next couple of weeks, with the number of announcement of administration restructures and so on. But what is your like picture, and how do you see it right now, compared to what you read in the news?
Sure, it's a great question, Michael, and I think it's I often compare the dark kitchen or the virtual kitchens that we're currently living in at the moment to what was happening with the casual dining restaurant sector about 10 years ago, when it was reaching its saturation point, and there was a real body of activity with a lot of investors and a lot of large groups internationally pumping money into the expansion of casual dining restaurants. And it was great 10 years ago. Everybody wanted a casual dining restaurant brand and expansion and sites in lucrative areas. However, a lot of operators failed to see the demographic change of their customer type evolve extremely quickly over a period of years. And that ultimately led to the death of the casual dining sector. I think that's quite harsh the way I put it. I wouldn't say the death of the casual dining restaurant, but I would certainly say the reduction of a lot of these operators. And it's exactly what you pointed out, Michael. Every day we're waking up to the news of a lot of people made redundant. There's been a lot of news, particularly over the past few days, of a very well known restaurant operator who's shutting down hundreds of their restaurants. It's a sign of the times. It's the customer type is different, the demand is different. And I feel that with the inevitable choice that people will have of working from home and the innovation of technology that will allow for this, the dark kitchens and delivery business is well placed to cater for it. But there is a big but, that it may fall victim to what happened to the casual dining sector, where a lot of virtual brands and a lot of dark kitchens will appear and compete for a very small market share in comparison to the restaurant sector. And ultimately, it will reach saturation point, and only the toughest will survive, and only those ones that offer a very bespoke service and product offering will survive.
It's quite interesting you're taking the dark kitchen angle on it, because a lot of people would think, and that's definitely also the noise that goes on in the background, is that there's some great stories about ghost kitchens being launched and aggressive rollouts, and there's even you can see suddenly there's a real attraction for very experienced operator, even casual dining operators, that goes into these dark kitchen and start operating and trying to invent their version of this. But again, as you say, with my humble experience of this as well. This is a very different model to operate, and you are looking at some very different numbers than you know normally if you were 100% in control of the process. But let's come back to the dynamics of it. But again, dark kitchen is definitely, as you say, it's a hot topic right now, and there's opportunities out there. Are you seeing that, the more, what do you call them, experience, the casual dining brands now moving into these kitchens as well as part of their survival strategy? Or is it new brands that's popping up that we never heard about before, entrepreneurial brands?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, Michael. And I think, there's a mix of the both. I think those restaurateurs and companies which have in excess of 15 sites plus, will have no choice but to innovate and use their existing kitchens and premises to offer delivery or click and collect services. Essentially, that is the only way they're going to be able to sustain or recoup some of their costs, which they've inherited through having high street locations. But also, those chains, they do have great departments within them that have got the expertise to certainly put together very good menus, to really put some fantastic marketing behind it, and got the contacts within the industry to push their product. And you can see that happening certainly over the past 6 weeks with your mainstream operators now offering delivery services if you order directly through the website in and around the M25. So, that there is a real direct business to customer interaction, removing the aggregators out of the equation. But on the back of it, you've got the entrepreneurs, absolutely, who are now coming up with multiple brands operating out of single site kitchens. So, you've got companies out there who specialized in burgers in central London locations. All of a sudden, they're now coming out with chicken brands, they're coming out with seafood brands, again, offering delivery or click and collect. So there is definitely going to be a huge entrepreneurial approach to this. We saw the resurgence of street food over the past sort of 5 to 8 years, very much a staple in high street locations and markets in London and certainly across the UK. And I feel that that's certainly going to be quite the same story when it comes to ghost kitchen and innovation when it's to branding. So a lot of those street food operators will inevitably will be looking at some sites they can commercial sites which they can operate out of, and they will simply take their street food business model and certainly innovate as a delivery concept, even though the time will come that street food operators will be allowed to operate fully and with no restrictions in the coming months. But as a secondary fail-safe option, yes, I can see a lot of entrepreneurs jumping on the delivery side. So they've got a protection if if in the future we do have another scenario that we're currently living in.
And then it's super interesting as there has been, this, almost collapse going on the high street. You see the savvy operators and the entrepreneurs seizing this opportunity. But it's a very interesting thing you said, but there's actually in danger for that very quickly that even this market can be oversaturated with operators and brands in a way. And then you also said something that was really interesting, which that actually ties very neatly together. That your brand actually have to stand out, because I guess there's still instead of how I read the market, there's still a lot of brand. Should I trust what I get from that brand? Because we are now in a situation where trust is always important, but now we're talking the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy. Money short, physiological and mental health is under threat. So you're in your bottom of Maslow. So trust becomes very important. So your ability to build that trust when you're just an online brand, I guess that's a massive challenge. If you don't, if you have had some high street like Wagamama, you'll probably be able to have some equity, brand equity. But if you don't have that, it's really a really some amazing skills in marketing you need to have to get those orders rolling, I guess, to build that confidence within people.
Absolutely, Michael, and I think trust is going to be a huge part of a business's success. Moving forward, you highlighted the big boys on the high street. They've got the resource and certainly the systems and the processes in place to show their customers that they'll be making enhanced safety measures, cleaning procedures, and so on. I think the smaller operators can equally be good as well. And I think this time will certainly show who are the strongest, who can really adapt into their business and bring on measures that will build trust for their customers. And I think there is also got to be a certain exposure of one's business for the customer. So I feel that a lot of food businesses, have always operated behind closed doors, particularly for restaurants and dark kitchens. But in terms to build trust, I think there'll be a lot of exposure, certainly marketing, a lot of focus in the actual preparation of the food and the kitchens on how they operate. So whether that's done through social media, whether that's done through some kind of special invitation for operators to really showcase their business to their local customers and further afield, I think that will be quite beneficial. And certainly if the operator is operating, within the parameters that they should be as a food business here in the UK, then they've got nothing to hide. And I feel that that would certainly build trust not only for their business, but their customers would feel more relaxed. And the greater benefit will be for all of us that work in hospitality, where the population would feel that yes, certainly one sector of society or business is really pushing placing the standards, and we can actually see that happening in aviation, which is very secondary to hospitality in the way they're operating and how they've certainly been sort of adapting their safety measures over the past 6 weeks or so to in preparation to ensure that their customers feel 100% secure when they're flying with them. So I feel that hospitality will have to follow suit.
And when you talk about, ghost kitchens, I guess as I have picked up, and this is my view as well, have really also got, there's some very good operators in there. Some people are really set high standard, but also there's been some, people in between that hasn't done a great job, and there's been a lot of, distrust towards the third party aggregators, and as we can come back to the third party aggregator in a second. There's an interesting conversation going on with that as well. Do you see that, the market has now become more professional because of the more professional organization actually now have entered the space with the head office team and so on? So the standards are slowly becoming better when you look at it from a consumer point of view as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's one of the USPs that these aggregators had. They didn't have them in the initial stages. I certainly do remember the junior days of Deliveroo and Uber Eats and Just Eat, and they were nowhere near to the level of professionalism they are at the moment. However, they are not food operators, and they are simply app developers and IT businesses. So they fundamentally, and this is a personal view of mine, they don't fundamentally understand the nuts and bolts of a food business. That said, over the years, they have invested heavily into bringing in people that can understand that business. However, I feel that that they made some good changes in terms of only adapting, for example, bringing on new business into their platforms that only have a FSA rating of 5 star, and that's it. But again, all of that was on pressure from the media and people making a lot of complaints that these aggregators were simply just after their commission and not really looking out for FSA ratings. At the moment, yes, they have really tightened their belts and who comes onto the platform and how they are presented on the platform. Everything from the health and safety, hygiene to the product offering, and so on and so forth. However, they still operate in a very different manner. A lot of all three of the aggregators have very much self-employed drivers, of which it's most of your listeners and you probably understand, Michael, that to manage a self-employed person is extremely difficult compared to having an employee. And that's something which I feel would need to change moving forward. And, it was kind of touched on last year by the media of the rights of these drivers of the gig economy. There was no holiday pay, no sick pay, and all the rest of it. I feel that for them to portray an even more professional image, particularly when it comes to health and safety and food hygiene, I feel that the aggregators need to take on more responsibility when looking after their self-employed drivers, for sure.
And I think you will automatically, see that as, the world's going to be different now, and there's going to be the governments needs to interfere more with employment and rules. I think that's going to be tightened up. But an interesting take on this is like you see these, you heard rumors under the pandemic or just recently a month ago that Deliveroo was in trouble if they couldn't get the money from Amazon released. And you see they moved out in Germany. You see all these movements around these platforms. And this morning, or was it yesterday, I read that Grubhub, Just Eat, and the Takeaway Group in Holland are talking about a massive global merger. And in my world, merger and acquisition only happens when your growth curve goes flat. That's when you can't grow organic yourself anymore. The only way you can grow organic is by joining forces and cut costs because of shared functions that can be actually utilized and distributed better through the organization. What do you think that's going to mean to the industry? Because they already, take some quite significant, fees. So the fees cannot go up anymore if they want to make money. So if they're now starting to merge these businesses, what is that going to mean for the industry and for the operator?
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. It's a fantastic question, and it's something which is been bubbling away when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. Takeaway.com, and the other one is Delivery Hero. They're huge machines that are just swallowing up brands like Uber Eats and Just Eat and so on and so forth. And I think what's going to happen is just that's this whole globalization of delivery brands under one parent umbrella, and we can see that in other sectors around the world. You think of, for example, a streaming service, and straight away you think of Netflix. Essentially, they've just capitalized that internationally. So when you want to look at alternative streaming services, there are some, but not as big as Netflix. And I feel that that's exactly what's going to happen with these aggregators. They're just going to fall onto one under one umbrella. The benefit being is going to be for the end consumer. They're going to have greater accessibility. They're going to have greater choice. The prices are going to be highly competitive. But the loser on this will be your food businesses and operators. However, as independent businesses and as operators, they still have that power to come together and really not join the bandwagon as such, and signing up to it. And that's something that I have seen happening over the past few years. And I certainly, of course, working with my clients, I reach out to the aggregators, and that's the natural way for a lot of businesses. However, there are some other alternatives that are coming onto the market that are offering much better fees, much less competition for them to be hosted. And I feel that that's probably a better way of going down that route. And I feel that certainly the long term future with these mergers and the type of product offering on the platforms will be of a certain level, I feel that they're not going to offer something perhaps which is a much more higher quality food item, or certainly from a bespoke restaurant. They're also going to certainly target certain operators. So I feel that's where, essentially where we are with these mergers. Personally, I feel it's a real shame. That it's going down this route, but we do live in a capitalist world, and that's essentially what's going to happen.
And maybe it's a sign that they can't make it work. They don't really have a model if they're not popped up by heavy investment money, because it was a bit like a dream everybody saw, and now we are past the dream stage. Now results has to be turned out, and even I'm surprised that they can't make it work. But I guess well, it's like anything. If you have very heavy costs to get your product keep moving and innovating, and they can't charge, I would say you can't charge the operator more. They're already charging way too high fees, and you see now the savvy operator is looking exactly what you are, the options that is out there, either to do it yourself with technology providers offering the technology to facilitate that, or just do a minimal trade on these platforms when they normally cannot attract people to their restaurants. Because if you start looking at the 30%, let's call it that, and break that down, if you had to use that cost on your own team, it starts to be viable now to have your own delivery team.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. And it was my original point which I raised, which was that the market is becoming saturated. And at the end of the day, when it comes to mergers and acquisitions, behind all of this are investors, and all they're looking for is their return on investment. They look at the numbers, they see the data, they analyze it, and that's essentially what the objective is. And it's unfortunately it's going to hurt the middlemen, and middle being men being the food operators. And I think certainly moving forward, it's got to be treaded very carefully. My original point of the casual dining sector, when there were huge angel investors and a lot of people putting in a lot of money into the expansion of these chained restaurants. We can talk about Carluccio's as an example, because it's essentially no longer here anymore. They had huge amounts of cash pumped in at the height of the noughties, and then subsequently, when just a small little blip occurred, which was 3 months of no cash flow this year, and the whole business went into administration. And it's fair to say that, did those original investors receive a return on the investment? Probably not. It suited them at that particular time of in the period. And it's the same with acquisitions right now when it comes to the aggregators. There's huge talk of Amazon, injecting cash into Deliveroo, and whether that was going to monopolize the UK delivery market, and so on and so forth. Now, I quite rightly, that needs to be investigated, and where it goes on from here. But ultimately, what's going to happen is just going to be a very cannibalistic approach to the high street, unfortunately, which is suffering at the moment through other pressures. And I just feel that that there's got to be some breathing space away from these mergers.
And it's interesting if you go back and talk a bit about, because we have before talked about ghost kitchen, and there's and you came up with a really good point at one point. You said to me, to really make a ghost kitchen or dark kitchen work, you cannot just do one brand and do that well. You actually need multiple brands. And you see the really savvy operator, they go in with 7 or 8 brands. They have like a portfolio, chicken brand, Asian brand, and a pizza brand, and then they develop that. So they actually, you almost need to develop so many different brands within the same kitchen. So what is there, like a golden rule for this is a good starting point? You already always have to start with something, but it's not just taking your existing concept and just then, if you don't have a massive marketing machine like Wagamama and McDonald's, I know that's a very different business, but just the average brand, you almost need to think about sub brands. within that kitchen, I guess.
Yes, no, you're very right, Michael. The explosion of brands is it's really interesting because let's give it. I'll give you an example. If you're sitting in your apartment in Shoreditch in East London, you open up one of these apps and you're just going to have so much choice of food. It will be absolutely unbelievable, and you could very much eat a different meal every day of the month and not get bored. But then you come out to the suburbs, or you come out to small towns or cities outside of London, and it's a very different story. You've got them big boys, your McDonald's, your KFC, your Nando's, and all those guys. But then you've then got the bottom end. You've just got your kebab shops, and you've got your pizza delivery and your Chinese, and that's about it. So yes, I think the offering of sub brands is very paramount, particularly outside of London. And certainly, everybody's tastes are different. So, if you look at your typical household, whether you've got a young couple living by themselves, or you've got a family with young children, or a family with multiple teenagers, or you've got friends coming around, everybody wants something that much more different. And also the fact that, certainly in the times that we're living at the moment, a lot of people have been exposed to a lot of culture on social media, a lot of culture through their own traveling through holidays. So a lot of people have become aware of many different tastes and many different foods that are on offer. So because of that, I think the ones that are successful at the moment and the ones that will be successful in the future is offering multiple brands under essentially under one umbrella or one kitchen. It's an execution that it takes time to develop, and it's extremely difficult. However, if you get the recipe right, the rewards can be extremely great. But again, it comes down to the innovation of the business owner and the entrepreneur. And I think any time that's going to be tested is certainly the time that we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard to make a brand that stands out. That's really hard because again, people very quickly look through, I believe, especially I think this period of time will make the consumer even more savvy, as I say, because they would have time now to reflect on a lot of things. And I think like a lot of food brands really need to figure out what is this new consumer that comes out on the other side, because we have had more than 66 days of new habits, you know a lot of cooking ourselves, connection with food again in a different way. Normally we consume the more than I think 35% of our food or 33% of our food outside the home. That has definitely gone down drastically. And that means that, a lot of people probably also have stopped eating things they shouldn't have eaten before. They've been better health. And I think they will not just turn back to the old consumer. There will be a lot of things brands need to think about to make sure, especially when you don't have a shop front so you can show who you are. You really need to think that through, the things you just said, and make sure you actually live those values as we go forward. I think that's going to be even maybe not yet, but as well, but definitely be a tipping point in that direction. And it's interesting you say you need a number of brands to make that happen. So this is not a quick rich scheme. That's what you're saying. It's not like you can just open yeah your kitchen and then the money rolls in when you turn on the tablet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. There's always going to be, cowboys out there who want to make a quick buck. I over the past few months, I've heard of all kinds of horror stories where people have been operating delivery services out of their front room, and cooking up, vast pots of food and sending them out through delivery online deliveries, with no health and safety or FSA guidelines or any kind of inspections. So yes, you're always going to get people that want to make a quick buck, and they're going to do this. However, they're just going to be short lived. The overall approach on this, Michael, will be investment into your brand, reinvesting the profits that you make to market your business bigger and better. And I think if you do that right, your customers will stand by you, because one thing about the UK is we are very loyal as customers. We do like certain brands, and we do stick through to them through even through tough times. So yes, I feel that it will level out. But I certainly feel that the marketing aspect and building the brand is one of the biggest challenges, certainly for ghost kitchens. But there are some very good operators out there at the moment who run virtual brands, and on the face of it, if you were to look at them and taste the food, you would be surprised that they don't have a premises on a high street. But look, it's what it is, and it's how it's going to be. So let's just see what happens in the future for sure.
Yeah, and again, coming back to getting quick rich scheme is as well, because there's still the variable cost here, and then you have your aggregated fees. But there's a thing here that which I really understood when I starting really trying to understand Ghost Kitchen. You're operating a number of brands, because your crossovers can be the same because it's different brands. There will be some crossovers, but your menu margins, because some evenings or days you could have one brand really go mental. If you had a pizza brand, really go mental. You have a salad brand, you'll probably see on a Friday, Saturday, the pizza brand go mental. So again, and then other days it will be the salad concept. But again, the margin game here is so important that you really understand your numbers and run your numbers all the time, because I guess there's not much wiggle room here, because there's still rent to be paid, which is still, if we talk London or urban places, is still quite high. So even if you go into a ghost kitchen, being in one myself, know that these kitchen per square meters are not cheap.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Michael. And you've hit the nail on the head there, because it all comes down to cost. To operate a ghost kitchen or a delivery business successfully comes down to your numbers, especially when when you're relying on your aggregators, and the aggregators themselves can take anything up to 35% of the value of your meal. You're left with very little maneuver. So yeah, your cost of goods needs to be spot on, and that inevitably comes down to your two biggest variables, which is your purchase of your ingredients, and how you manage your labor. And ingredients you can negotiate, you can speak to suppliers and sourcing and local and all the rest of it. That's quite straightforward. However, it's managing labor which is extremely key, and this comes down to some real good training, and ensuring you've got the right people and the right skill level in your kitchen. So inevitably, bringing someone to work in a ghost kitchen, essentially you're recruiting an octopus. Someone who's got 8 arms and who can flip between different orders and different brands, which is completely unheard of if you talk to a chef from a normal restaurant. But I think, again, that's something which people would need to adapt, certainly when it comes to recruitment. They would need to be really open and understand that the type of people that they're bringing into their business is people that can multitask and have got multi ways of thinking, who can flip between brands. That's the only way they're going to survive, because essentially if you've got a ghost kitchen and you've got 6 different brands, you're not going to have 6 different chefs. It's you're probably going to end up having 3 stroke 4 chefs who can then each do 2 or 3 brands each, and you probably push it a little bit more to maximize on your labor control. But yes, inevitably that's where it sits at the moment. Yeah.
And one of the interesting things you told me about once was there's actually operators out there that specialize in, taking concepts, so like the franchise model, where they take on a concept and they run it, because they are expert in running franchise concepts within the dark kitchen. And I was very surprised that actually there was franchising happening within this sector. So just because I think there's a lot of people that don't know, can you just give like the overview about how that works and how big this is in a way? Because this was what you saw with the QSR sector as well 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, the franchising, it was interesting. there's been a sub industry that's kind of popping up through virtual kitchens and franchising. So you've got your standard operators that, they're single site or multi site operators with franchise agreements with your big boys. They just operate as per normal, as you would expect. But the sub franchising essentially means that you create these virtual brands and approach a prospective franchise partner who essentially has got a A3 setup. So A3 being a fast food operator with the capacity of frying and extraction systems. And you would approach them and you would sell them one of your franchise brands, a virtual brand, and they would simply construct your meal for you and then dispatch it through the aggregator. And in return, they would receive profits as expected, but the franchisor would receive royalties for hosting that brand and subsequent any other franchise. In a sense, it operates like a typical franchise model, so they'll make money on the cost of goods that they supply to the franchisee and subsequent packaging and other marketing support that they give. And then the franchisee subsequently pays a royalty, just like an existing franchise model. So that one's been popping up certainly across Europe, and it's happening with a couple of operators in the UK. And then subsequently, it's been happening in Dubai. There's a couple of operators out there that are following a similar suit. So that's something which, potentially could open up and can be quite lucrative moving forward. So that's another innovation that's kind of sort of uh, branched off the whole virtual kitchen operator. And again, it's quite cost heavy. There's a lot of preparation when it comes to, arranging a CPU unit, ensuring that you've got the quite correct cash flow and so on and so forth. And there's a lot of training involved with the partners and the franchisees and so forth and so on. So it's not as easy as simply just signing up or developing your own kitchen brand. But that concept itself, that is something which perhaps could, offer an opportunity to existing restaurateurs who have had vacant premises over the past 3 months, who have now in a position where they've certainly got to generate additional revenue streams to compensate for the reduction in seating capacity because of social distancing. So this could be another revenue stream. So that is something which, certainly is something to look out for, one for the future.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if you agree with me, but I think again, if you were an operator thinking about franchising your concept, it still take the same amount of work, I guess, as it takes to franchise any other operation. It's not just a left-hand job. You really have to know your concept in and out and know it works when you hand it over to somebody else.
Absolutely, 100%, Michael. Couldn't agree with you more. It's something which has to be proven, and it's something which you've got to stand by. And as the principality of franchising is that you stand by your product and everything that's been worked towards it. And once you're in a position to market it, yes, it would go. And I think at the moment, it's certainly an opportunity that needs to be looked into. And there's a couple of operators that, are doing pretty well out of this. But yeah, it's something which, yeah, needs to be seriously looked into.
So leaving the details of dark kitchen, I think we covered everything about the importance of standing out, the setup of operation, the challenges with the accurator, and the strengths of them. And let's go in and talk a bit about the future for the general industry. We have already touched about where you think the whole dark kitchen, but every day right now there is, as we said in the beginning, really sad news. What is your grasp of you spend your life in this industry, and now we're looking at this, this, it's just disappearing between our hands, the industry, and the size of it. It's maybe gonna, you know, there's definitely predictions in around 50% of operators we know today is not going to exist in 12 to 18 months. So what is your view on it all, and where do you think we are? And I know you don't have a crystal ball. but in 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, great question, Michael. And I wish we all had a crystal ball at the moment, because it would make our lives so much easier. Look, the landscape is permanently changed. That is for sure. In the 25 years that I've been in hospitality and experienced hospitality in many countries around the world, I've done everything and anything that can be done to do with this business. This is something which is, it's taken everybody back 2 steps. But I'm always the optimist, and I feel my principal belief is, and the reason why I entered hospitality is the simple fact that people like to eat, and people will always want to be fed, and they like the experience of hospitality. And I don't think that will ever change. We are living in a world where population is only going one way. Which is increase of population, and the demands are going to be there to feed people. I feel that within the next 6 months, life will be pretty much as normal as can be. I think COVID-19 will be something which will be written in history. And it's something that we would have to live with until that time comes in the future where vaccines are in mass production. However, there are going to be some serious casualties of this, and I think this year has just been the final nail in the coffin. There was a lot of businesses that were destined to be mothballed, and that can be seen already. That they literally had their time and they were just sort of plodding along. The future, Michael, I feel that it's just simply, going to be bigger and better than it's ever been. I think there's going to be a big bounce back. I think there's going to be a real a support by the general public, not only in this country but internationally, and we can see this happening in countries that have come out of their complete lockdown, places like China, Italy, Spain, New Zealand, South Korea. They've all demonstrated that their customers have been very supportive and very much engaging with restaurant operators and takeaway and grab and go, and certainly with QSR as well. And you can see that at the moment with the likes of McDonald's that opened up. A few weeks ago, there were huge queues that were forming for their services, and that's not because of people have missed out a takeaway or something. Takeaways were always available during lockdown, but I feel that people just want the sense of normality. So I think yes, there's going to be a lot of doom and gloom, and there are going to be a lot more casualties, and unfortunately, many people are going to be losing their jobs. But it's the ones which really plan for the future and really see this as an opportunity, as much as restaurants went through the similar thing, albeit not this dramatic, back in 2007 and 8 when we had the last financial crisis. There was a lot of operators that went pop. I unfortunately at that time lost a franchise business of mine, so yes, I've been at the receiving end of losing a business and going into administration. However, I saw some huge benefits in the years after that, where the economies bounced back, and there was a lot of surgence in business. So I feel that it can only go one way, which is people will always want to eat and people will always want to have an experience, and that's just not going to stop. And it just takes people like ourselves and the great people that still work in hospitality to drive that message forward.
Yeah, and I think there's no more than ever as we reopen. You're right. Then there's a need for hope and optimism as well. And I think you're absolutely right. I think just the speed of it. I think that's the shocking, because this was already coming. Because if you look at some of the operators fail, not saying everyone, but some of them failing, I would say if we're talking about standing out and having a unique brand, and having the right story behind and wanted to do, they were just a bit stuck in time. They lost their ways, and they were just waiting for the slow death, and now they're getting it really, really fast. Some of them, and I'm not including everyone, but there's definitely some that was up for grabs in my world, and are just waiting on the to leave anyway. But again, if you think about the individual, person working in the sector, this is probably the one I feel for the most. And the small operator, this is really tough because there's going to be a period where it's going to be very difficult to find new work, and hopefully we're not going to lose too much of our great talent as well, because we'll see. I think we've seen again that people in hospitality, when we get the knife on the throat, we can really innovate on a level. And we just have to keep remembering this afterwards. That's one of the things I want to keep on saying to people. Remember how fast you could innovate when you were a bit under pressure, and keep on having that innovation, because that's how you win in the long run. So in the end of the podcast, yes, I always ask the guests to give like three top advice right now where we are in the world. So if you were giving advice to your clients right now, what would be the three top advice they should follow?
Sure. Okay. Right. So, top three that I would advise my clients. In fact, it's something which I've been doing anyway with my clients in recent times. First one would be the adaptation in technology. I can never understate that enough. It's something which, yes, technology has been the forefront of many innovations in many sectors around the world, and the times we're living in. But in hospitality, I think naturally we're just shy away from technology. We just kind of put a stop to till systems and PDQ machines, and that's about it, and the odd tablet here and there. But I feel that the actual adaptation of technology, first and foremost, there's some really good stuff out there that can really help business owners take the next step in maximizing their efficiency, and thus maximizing their profitability. Number two would be innovation of food offering. That one, I think, is a clear example, quite rightly, Michael, what you touched on just now. The businesses that have gone into administration have fallen away quite drastically over the past few months, and the ones which are going to fall, unfortunately, in the coming months, have simply not innovated their food offering. They're simply living in an era where the businesses have been led by a certain generation, and that's the black and white truth. So I feel to innovate in food is absolutely paramount. I can't stress that enough. And I think at the moment, certainly reaching out to your millennials, to your Generation Z and your Generation X is really, really, really important. Those are the customers that probably know a lot more about food and ingredients than we probably knew a generation ago. So I think that's definitely number two. And number three, certainly showcasing your hygiene and your health and safety measures. And I think that's very important. Everyone's been hidden under this background of, FSA ratings and scores on the door, which is absolutely important. And that's the way it should be. And very proud to display, their 4-star, 5-star rating on their doors. However, absolutely showcasing, further measures, showcasing, the auditing practices, inviting people into their kitchens, really making them understand exactly how a hospitality business runs. I think is my number three. And I think especially in the climate that we're living in, and the expectation of food operators in the future, I think that's something that, food business operators need to really start looking into. And that's my top three, Michael.
Very good advice, and especially I think it's the combination of these three things that's very important, and balancing that, because there's a lot of people either, I've seen some operators really focusing on one of those. It's again the balance you strike between those three right now, and of course balance is hard when you're sailing into a big wave in principle. But yeah, I think they were great advice there. And there was a lot of nuggets during the conversation as well. So, Jazz, thank you so much for your time and your in-depth knowledge sharing on the dark kitchen and the delivery model. I'm sure that there's some people out there that really have got some great insights there about how to move on from here.
Thank you, Michael, for hosting me. It's been a real pleasure in sharing this conversation with you. And yeah, I just wish everybody the best of luck. And yeah, just keep thinking forward.
You too. Just stay safe, and power and energy to you as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Yazz. So interesting to understand more about dark kitchen and how successful operating them. The core learning here is it's not a walk in the park. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please give us a like, share it with people you think would benefit from it, rate, and also let us know what you think. Thanks to Vitamojo for making it possible. If you'd like to know more about Vitamojo, you can find them on software.vitamojo.com or contact them directly at nick.lidl@vitamojo.com. Keep on innovating.